Mushoku Tensei is one of the most popular anime in the past decade thanks to its world building, character development and its unique storyline. However, it's also one of the most controversial ones due to its constant fanservice and the questionable acts of its main character, which can sometimes make you feel incredibly uncomfortable. Nevertheless, if you just look past that, you can get a genuinely unique experience of what an isekai should be. Season 1 primarily focuses on character introductions. We get to know what kind of world Rudeus reincarnated into, what he is capable of, how he acts in certain situations, and we witness his overall character development. In contrast, Part 2 shifts its focus towards world building, showcasing the diverse range of people in societies in the story. It also delves into the development of the side characters, but most importantly, it quickly tones down the enemy's weirdness with significantly less fanservice.
Oh my god!
Also ending the anime at its peak with a genuinely terrifying battle against Orsted. That scene was truly horrifying. We had no idea who this guy was, yet even at first glance we knew he's not good, or at least not with us. The whole season was built upon showing off just how strong they are, yet they were destroyed in a matter of seconds. The whole episode felt like a new start. But nah, who am I kidding? It turned back into the same shit as it was before. However, it introduced a new storyline: depression. It's the main focus at the beginning of the second season, and as much as it annoyed me towards the end of part 2, I really enjoyed how it was written overall. After Roger split from them and Eris left on her own, Rudeus fell into a state of depression. It's genuinely interesting how grounded it feels. This same thing could have happened after they teleported to the Demon Continent or when he faced Orsted, with the realization that he couldn't defend his friends because he wasn't strong enough. That would have been the perfect reason. However, the writer chose to take a more relatable route, which, considering the past events, can be a bit laughable. Nevertheless, it shows us that Rudeus is still just as human as the rest of us, and how even the smallest thing can have the biggest impact. The season starts out with him looking for his mother, but without any sense of direction. He doesn't really know what to do, where to go, he just goes cause he feels like he has to. However, I really like how the story quickly turns around in just 2 episodes and is able to make him realize what he lives for. Even though we didn't spend much time with them, I really like these side characters. They were remarkably impactful in such a short time. Of course, it also introduced us to one of the most cringe scenes, where Rudeus tries to have a good time with Sara, but just couldn't get it up. It was painful to watch, and this won't be the only time we will feel that way. One of the biggest reasons why some people dislike Mushoku Tensei is because of its fanservice. It can be really uncomfortable to watch, but that is the point. It aims to make you feel uncomfortable. At the end of the day, it depicts the story of a genuine loser who is striving to be better, to do better than in his previous life. However, that doesn't mean that everything is going to change instantly. As much as I feel uncomfortable about it, I understand why it exists and why it's important. Still, there are certain things that just shouldn't exist. Like, why do I have to see him sniffing panties? Why do I have to hear that girl getting fucked? I know she's cursed, I know she has to do it, but can they just not show it every episode? Anyway, one thing that came from these scenes is actually the storyline of the second season. After he realized he couldn't get it up, he spends the rest of the season figuring out how to fix it. He enrolls at Ranoa University of Magic because a human god promised that he would find a cure for his erectile dysfunction. A promise that becomes a reality thanks to an aphrodisiac and Sylphy. Sylphy is our first returning main character. She's a really weird character overall, but that is not necessarily a bad thing. Every character is weird in their own way, and that makes them feel more realistic. What I really appreciate about the writing is that every character undergoes development, even if the story doesn't necessarily explain it. When we haven't seen a character for a while, they are going to be a bit different, act a bit different. This might sound obvious, but other anime tend to show and explain why a character changed. In contrast, Mushoku Tensei doesn't do that. It simply makes sure you can figure it out on your own. I personally really enjoyed Sylphy's story, particularly what happened to her after the teleportation disaster. She found herself transported to the palace of the kingdom of Asura, where she accidentally killed a monster threatening the life of Ariel, a princess who somewhat blackmailed her after she saved her life, making Sylphy her bodyguard. I really appreciate that this episode doesn't waste any time, it constantly progresses. They both come to understand their situation, and they are both willing to help each other. Ariel realizes that making Sylphy her bodyguard is somewhat selfish and decides to release her from her service. However, Sylphy has grown to see Ariel as a friend and chose to stay with her. All of this in one episode. The first core is notably different from the previous one. The story itself progresses at a slower pace, but it places much more emphasis on the characters themselves, highlighting their weaknesses and showcasing significant growth in a relatively short time. This is thanks to its excellent writing, which this core excels at. In particular, it gives a significant spotlight to the side characters. I appreciate the way they handle it. There are so many characters, yet each of them matters, and all of them impact the story. I talked about the group that helped Rudeus, as well as the princess and Luke, but there are also numerous characters who have returned from the previous seasons, which is quite cool. It's rare to see characters return, especially if they weren't necessarily important to the plot. For example, we get to see Liz, who was part of Paul's party and was searching for Rudeus' family with Roxy. There wasn't much focus on her other than her curse, and it felt like a character who solely existed for the sake of fan service. However, I really appreciate that they reintroduced her once again and gave her a more important role, allowing us to understand her character better, but not necessarily just forcing her to be there. She quite quickly fades away to the background. We also have characters like Zanoba, who seemed like a character that was only important for one episode. I really didn't expect him to return. He's quite an annoying character, but in a good way. He's really fun in his own way. Now the only thing I didn't really like related to the side characters was the slavery part. I don't understand why every single isekai needs to have some form of slavery. And in Mushoku Tensei, it was especially poorly written. I really dislike that Rudeus compared his past life to hers. Comparing a slave to someone who refused to leave his house just doesn't sit right with me. There could be so many other options that would have made it better. For example, she could have been kidnapped, they saved her, she had nowhere to go, and they decided to raise her. There are certain limits, and I just don't understand why so many anime try to incorporate slavery into their stories. Anyway, the best thing that happened this season has to be the end of it. Rudeus first and foremost finds a solution for his issue, which was the main story of this core. It's also really obvious that the next core will be a lot more adventure filled, which is what most people want. But I like that the story is not just straight up adventuring. It sometimes takes its time and overall it just incorporates a lot of slice of life elements that gives us a healthy balance of world building and character development. Overall, this core is probably one of the weakest one, but this kind of build-ups are necessary to make a good story. Rushing to the good parts is not always the best thing. Most of my favorite stories spend a lot of time setting up the world, the characters, basically everything before there is any sort of progress in the story itself. Mushoku Tensei does a really good job of that, and that's why season 2 is so important. Anyway, if you want to see my video about season 1, then click there. If you enjoyed this one, like and subscribe. Bye!